tonight. Former Vice President Joe Biden says that if he wins, he'll be one of the most progressive presidents in U.S. history. So let's take a look at what the progressive future might mean. For 2 months, we've been witnessing chaos and destruction in Portland and other cities run by progressive Democrats. Yet no one in the Democratic Party will stand up and condemn the violence as if they really mean it. Well, let's bring in Democratic strategist Kevin Walling and Fox News contributors Guy Benson and Jason Chaffetz, also former Republican congressmen. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you.
Hey, Shannon. Good to see you.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Jason, I'll start with you. Bernie Goldberg saying there that, listen, he's no fan of Trump. He spells that out in this piece, but he says what the Democrats have turned into is something that his father, who was a lifelong, card-carrying Democrat, would never recognize and never vote for. So he says despite how he personally feels about Trump, he hopes he wins because he doesn't trust Democrats to run the country.
Well, I think this election, there is a stark difference between Joe Biden's approach to defund and, as in his words, redirect funding from law enforcement to other social programs, where Donald Trump has taken a very strong stance on law enforcement. It used to be that Democrats and Republicans were united in support of law enforcement, but not in this election. And if you care about law enforcement, law and order, then you're going to be voting for Donald Trump and the Republicans in November. And the Democrats just seem to think that this lawlessness, these riots, this looting is just fine because they don't seem to push back with any real sincerity and effort. And there is a huge difference in this election.
Well, Kevin, Reuters writing about this quotes Mary Aponte. They describe her as a 38-year-old mother in suburban Bucks County, Pennsylvania. She says she's not a Trump supporter, but adds this: I fear for what will happen in major cities if we get Biden in office when it comes to the police. Kevin, how do you think this issue plays with voters?
Yeah, Shannon, well, let me be that Democrat on this panel to condemn this violence that we're seeing in Portland and Chicago and New York and other places. The vice president has stood with law enforcement and has stood with peaceful protesters over these last couple of months in the wake of the George Floyd killing. And we need to support local law enforcement, of course. We need to make sure that we're rooting out these aggressors on the city that are co-opting this message, as former Governor Howard Dean said at the outset of this segment, that are using this as cover to destroy our cities. And Democrats need to stand firm and condemn this where we can.
Okay, Guy, Reuters also under this headline says why Trump's tough on crime message is not breaking through in suburban America. Cites some polling results from earlier mid-July. They say Reuters Ipsos polling this month shows white suburban Americans are far more worried about the economy and health care than crime. Guy?
Yeah, that's probably true, although I would wait and see what those numbers look like this time next month if this chaos continues to play out in some of these cities. And look, it's good, and I'm glad that Kevin is willing to take a stand on this issue, but the fact is many significant figures in his party, in the Democratic Party, have been unwilling to do so. Some put out these sort of weak, perfunctory statements about it, but there's no fire in the belly of outrage as cities get burned to the ground and businesses smashed and lives ruined. And then you have people like Jerry Nadler, who's a committee chairman in the House of Representatives, calling Antifa in Seattle and Portland a myth, which is just sort of, crazy. That's a denial of reality. I'm also glad that the mayor of the city of Portland has finally come around to recognize that there's some attempted murder happening at the hands of Antifa as they target police precincts and try to light them on fire with people inside. I'm just wondering where he's been for the last 2.5 months when some of those same tactics were used against federal agents. Democrats pretended the federal agents were the problem. Federal agents left, and guess what? They're still attacking the police in neighborhoods. Surprise.
Okay, I want to get you all quickly to weigh in on this, each of you too, about this idea of these executive orders the president has rolled out. You'll remember the president said, President Obama back in 2014, we're not going to wait for legislation in order to make sure Americans have what they need. I've got a pen and a phone. Wall Street Journal saying as part of his pen and phone strategy, he used executive diktats to provide work permits for millions of undocumented aliens. Democrats and the media then cheered these abuses. Folks have been on both sides of this EO order, and now that it's Trump, it's a negative to most of the mainstream media and on the left. So very quickly, if I can have a comment from each of you, Jason, Kevin, and then Guy.
It has been normal, customary, and regular that the administration will redirect funds within the appropriations. In the Obama administration, they did $200 billion in their final year of programs that were not authorized by Congress. So if you look at those categories, it is normal, custom, and it happens regularly. I wish Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer would actually be serious about coming to the negotiation table and don't just saying we're going to cut the pie in half. That's not how this works.
Kevin?
Listen, Shannon, there's always seems to be a tweet with this president who rightly condemned, executive orders from his predecessors now using that same power, of course, when he's in office. I think, as Senator Ben Sass said, Republican from Nebraska, that this is unconstitutional. There will be ramifications coming out of this. Of course, it's a Republican administration, so the majority of the Republicans are silent.
Guy, I would imagine there are going to be some court battles, too. Final word to you.
Yeah, and the Democrats who cheered all this executive overreach from President Obama, some of it even worse than this, are now up in arms and they're sticklers on the separation of powers. Look, the Wall Street Journal editorial that you referenced is excellent. I agree with it. This needs to be solved by Congress. That means Republicans need to get on the same page. They're currently not. Democrats need to be somewhat constructive and realistic. Currently, they're not, and we'll see if that changes.
All right, Guy, Kevin, and Jason, great to see all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.